Hi everybody, welcome to this new episode for GenAI Nerd channel, and in this video I want to show you how you can build a skill that will make it very easy for you to create rich projects in Claude Cowork. And in this video I will first of all explain why it is important today to use projects. Next I will show you the skill that I have created and that you can imitate to help you in creating rich projects with rich context, which means specific instructions and specific skills. And finally, I will demonstrate that skill with a specific example. And at the end of the video, I will also briefly mention how you can apply the same approach also in Codex of OpenAI, but I will show in this video how you can do it in Claude. So let's get started. Yes, so let me first of all briefly explain why it is important today to work with projects. Now, for a very long time, we have been using GenAI mainly by writing prompts. And here I have tried to kind of visualize what that means. And so it kind of means that you enter an empty room and that you will read from a paper an instruction to ChatGPT that it will then execute. Yeah, but every time when you leave the room will stay empty. Then when you come back in, you actually have to give a lot of information in your prompt because the room is empty and ChatGPT or Claude will not know a lot about you. And so that is why today context engineering has become so important. And let me try to visualize what that means. Yeah, so when we talk about context engineering, it actually means that we will decorate a room with all kinds of information that Claude or ChatGPT can use to help us. And more specifically, what can you use as decoration? We have a memory. Yeah, so both Claude and OpenAI keep a memory of you, so they know a bit what you have done with ChatGPT or Claude in the past. You can give instructions on how Claude or ChatGPT should act in a particular room. You can give the room some knowledge sources, and you can give the room some skills. And these are kind of specific capabilities that it can leverage whenever it thinks it is necessary. And in that way, actually your prompt, what you are reading from the paper is becoming less important and the context is becoming more important. Moreover, every time when you now enter that room, ChatGPT or Claude will already know a lot about you. And so we use projects in Claude and ChatGPT to create these kinds of rooms. And that means if you want to create a good project, you will have to give instructions, knowledge sources, and skills. Now, this can actually be quite consuming to create all these different aspects. Yeah, so for instructions, you will have to create in Claude a claude.md file. You will have to add knowledge sources to your project, and you need to build skills. And these are then stored as a skill.md file. And this is quite time consuming, but so what I will now show you is how I actually built a skill that will actually create all that information for you as a first draft so that you don't have to every time again create all these files yourself. So let me show you how that works. Yeah, so I'm now in my Claude environment and I'm in the chat environment. And as you will know, today it's very easy to build skills in Claude. You simply have to say that you want to build a skill and then it will immediately help you building a skill. So here is actually the prompt that I used, and I will also add that prompt to the descriptions of the video. So this is a prompt to create a context decorator skill. So this is actually a skill that you can use to ask Claude for you to create full context for a particular project. And so when you use this skill, it will actually create for you a claude.md file. It will create some first knowledge sources, and it will create skills that are relevant for that project. So this is a skill that will help you to create context for projects. I will also make sure that you have a link to the actual skill that has been created so that you can simply download the skill and then upload the skill in your own Claude environment. So let me now show you how you can use this context decorator skill to create a particular project with a specific example. Yeah, so here is the example of a project that I wanted to create. So I'm what is called in German a Kleinunternehmer. So I can do as a private person activities for companies. And of course, when I do, for instance, a workshop for a company on AI, I need to send an invoice to that company. And that's always quite time consuming. So now I wanted to build a project that can help me to easily create invoices for a particular customer in a standardized way. And so what did I do here? I simply uploaded some examples of prior invoices that I have sent out. And then I now here leverage my context decorator skill. So I'm saying use the context decorator skill to create context for a project that allows automatically for the creation of invoices as Kleinunternehmer mit Umsatzsteuerpflicht. Yeah, that's the German word for being a single person having your own commercial activities. So then this context decorator skill will be enabled. So here we can now scroll down. So it started then to find out what do I need to do. Here it actually asked me some follow-up questions. How exactly should this project look like? So then automatically it asks me some follow-up questions, because in the decorator skill, I have pushed it to keep the human in the loop. Yeah? So it's quite normal that I now have to answer some follow-up questions to kind of fine-tune this project for me. And then it continues working. It might ask you some additional questions, but then in the end, it now creates for me a full project structure that you can see here. Yeah? So this is the overview now of all the files that it created for me for this project. So you see it created for me a Claude.md file. It created some additional knowledge sources on how to create an invoice, how to keep a client directory, and it also has built some skills for me. And then totally at the end you will see I can now download all these different documents, and the best thing you can do now is to simply do download all, and then you get a zip file with all the files. And the best thing is also to immediately save your skills. So in this case, it built two different skills for me. One skill to create an invoice, one to keep track of all the customers to whom I sent an invoice. So then you just save the skill, and then they will be automatically saved in your skills that you can access here via customize. And the other documents will now be on your computer in a separate folder. So let me show you how that looks like. Yes, so when I now go to my downloads folder, I have a zip file, and in that zip file, I can find all the files that have been created for me. And so you see you have these skill files, but they are already saved in Claude. So I now just have to pick these other files and then create a separate folder where I store these files. So let me show you the folder that I have created based on these files. Yeah, so I now created on my computer an invoice creator project folder. And in that folder, I store my Claude.md file, and the other knowledge files I have stored in a subfolder called knowledge. And so this is now the folder that I can start using to create invoices. And let me briefly show you how that works. Yes, so in my Claude Cowork, I have now created a project, and you can do that here by simply clicking on new project and then connecting the folder on your computer where you have stored the file. So I have now created an invoice creator project. Yeah, so that's the project where I have my files that have been created before. And then in this project, I can start prompting. Yeah? So let me show you how that works. Yes, and here I now have a purely theoretical example. So let's imagine that I have done a workshop for a company, Capital GmbH, and I want to send them an invoice for 4,000 euros. Then I can now simply in this project write a prompt, create an invoice for Capital GmbH, as I conducted a workshop for them on novel trends in generative AI for 4,000 euros. And then it will enable the skills that have been built. It will look at the instructions in my project, and it will step for step build this invoice for me. It will also ask me some follow-up questions to have all the necessary information to build the invoice. And then step by step, it will build this invoice. And as output, as I requested, I will get a Word file with this invoice. So now we can briefly take a look at the final invoice being created. Yes, so now here you can see the invoice that it created for me, and this is actually perfectly in line with how I wanted the invoice to be created. So in this way you can see how I can build with the context decorator for whatever project I want, all the necessary context, and then I can start applying these projects for specific activities. And of course, if I now would not be happy about that, I could go back to my Claude, ask for some fine-tuning, and then immediately I can update my instructions, my skills, and in that way it also can become a kind of self-learning system. And that's the great thing of Claude Cowork, that then you can continuously interact with the context that you have created, and in that way you can start creating very customized, personalized projects that can do exactly what you want. Now, if you have a ChatGPT subscription and not a Claude subscription, and you don't want to have both, actually also in ChatGPT you can do that. In order to use this kind of tools in ChatGPT, you actually need to go to a separate app, which is called the Codex app. So if I go to my ChatGPT account, I just have to click here on Codex. And then I will have the possibility here to download the Codex app. Yeah, so for OpenAI, ChatGPT, which is Claude Chat, is a separate environment, and Codex app, which is kind of the Claude Cowork, is also a separate app. So whereas Claude has combined them in OpenAI, there are two separate apps. So now I need to use the Codex app. So let me show you how that looks like. Yeah, so now I'm here in the Codex app, and here I can now do exactly the same as I would do in Claude. So here I could now enter this prompt to create this context decorator skill. And then this skill will be stored into your Codex skills. And then again, as I showed you before, you can start applying that skill to build context for projects and then to apply these projects in Codex. So in that way, fundamentally, you can do exactly the same in Codex of OpenAI if you would have a ChatGPT subscription. Okay, I hope that this is helpful to help you to start building projects, to help you create the necessary context for projects. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for your attention. Bye.